Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our showing of The Magnificent Seven, 1960, the third selection in our current miniseries, Scintillating Movie Scores, directed by John Sturges, starring Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen. The famous score was composed by Elmer Bernstein, and the screenplay was written by William Roberts. This is a remake of Akira Kurosawa's film, Seven Samurai from 1954, done in classic Hollywood Western style. It was the last great traditional American Western to be produced before the rise of TV in the United States killed the genre. The U.S. rights to a remake were acquired from Kurosawa for the mere sum of $2,500. The seven gunslingers were played by Brynner, McQueen, Robert Vaughn, Charles Bronson, Brad Dexter, James Coburn, and German actor Horst Buchholz, and the bandit leader, Calavera, by Eli Wallach. The film was a moderate critical and commercial success in the U.S., earning $9.75 million on a budget of $2 million when it was released. But it was an absolute blockbuster in Europe, ultimately earning a significant profit. Richard L. Coe of the Washington Post called this movie rough, tough, funny, and splashy. Kurosawa was so impressed with it, it gave Sturges a Japanese ceremonial sword. The Magnificent Seven has grown greatly in esteem since its release due to its fine cast, iconic score, and the quality of its script, and has been lauded as the finest Western of all time. Bernstein's music was nominated for an Oscar and is listed number 8 on the American Film Institute's list of the top 25 American film scores. In 2005, the movie was selected for inclusion in the U.S. National Film Registry. The movie was filmed in Mexico, where both a farmer's village and the U.S. border town were built near Cuernavaca. Other film sites were located in Durango, Tepoztlan, and Churubusco Studios in Mexico City. The first scenes filmed were of only 6 of the gunfighters on their journey to the Mexican village before the Chico character was brought into the group. Producer Walter Mirisch hired Walter Bernstein, a blacklisted screenwriter, to produce a script to be faithfully adopted from the Japanese screenplay for Seven Samurai. He was followed by Walter Newman, whose uncredited version makes up most of the finished film. Finally, William Roberts was hired to make changes at the last minute, which were required by the film's Mexican censor. Upon Roberts' arrival, Newman withdrew and refused to accept credit for his work. Sadly, he never made a dime from his contribution to the screenplay. The language from this script became so well known that it became a template for every Western film or TV series that followed. Dmitri Tiomkin was supposed to write the score, but he and the director had a falling out over creative differences, and Tiomkin was replaced by the young Elmer Bernstein. This opened the way to Bernstein's memorable music, blessed with a readily recognizable main theme, and it provides amazingly effective support to the film's storyline. There are allusions to 20th century symphonic works, such as Bartók's Concerto for Orchestra, the second movement, in the tense, quiet music just before the shootout. By 1963, the theme song had become so famous that it was being used for the Marlboro Man cigarette commercials, and it was included in a scene from the James Bond film Moonraker, and in the 2004 documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, and other films. In Western episodes of The Simpsons, was even played by the Celtic Football Club whenever its player Henrik Larsson scored a goal. Bernstein famously also wrote the score for The Three Amigos, 1986, a spoof on The Magnificent Seven. Plot summary. A small Mexican village is repeatedly attacked and plundered by the bandit Calavera and his band of 30 thieves. The village elders ask Chris Adams to help them buy weapons, but he suggests a better plan, to send a party of recruiters north to the U.S. to hire some gunslingers who will defend their community from these dreaded annual raids. Adams soon recruits 6 more hired guns, and the defenders ride into town ready to protect the townsfolk against Calavera's attacks. Meanwhile, friendships are formed, and love blossoms between one of the men and a beautiful local girl, but not all of the defenders will survive. Fun facts about the film. Because Brenner was shorter than McQueen, he built up a little mound of soil on which he stood in scenes with McQueen. The two men were serious rivals on set, with McQueen always trying to find ways to upstage Brenner, such as fiddling with his hat. When the newspapers began to report their rivalry, Brenner said, "I never feud with actors. I feud with studios." Brenner wanted McQueen in the movie, but later regretted it because they got along very poorly. By 1960, Brenner and McQueen reconciled, when McQueen, who was by then dying of cancer, phoned Brenner to thank him for letting him remain in the picture despite their disagreements. James Coburn was a big fan of Seven Samurai. He incorporated Seiji Miyaguchi's performance as Kyuzo into his own performance. Composer John Williams played the piano during the recording of Bernstein's score. Wallace wore a silk shirt, sported gold rings and teeth, and rode with a silver-trimmed saddle that Marlon Brando had ridden in One-Eyed Jack's 1961, because he wanted to show what Calvera did with his lute. Mexican centers on set insisted that the farmers be dressed in spotlessly clean clothes, despite the fact that all the gringos were in dirty clothing. They didn't want the Mexicans to appear poverty-stricken. This caused a huge production delay, because all the dirty costumes had to be thoroughly cleaned before filming could begin. The horse that Brenner was riding was named Pie. It's the same one ridden by James Stewart in most of his westerns. The movie appears to be set in the late 1880s, but all the characters wear low-slung, Buscabero-styled holsters, which had not come into use until the 1900s. Bronson's character, Bernardo O'Reilly, is a reference to Chilean independence leader Bernardo O'Higgins, who liberated Chile from Spanish rule in the Chilean War of Independence from 1810 to 26. The USS guided missile destroyer Henry B. Wilson adopted the theme from the Magnificent Seven as the music to be played every time it left port. The vessel also had a blue and gold flag, which was displayed whenever the theme was played, which said Magnificent Seven. Buckles had to get a deep tan to look more convincing as a Mexican. Today, that would lead to questions of racism, because Sturgis had hired a Caucasian instead of an Hispanic to play the role, as Aditi had when he also hired Eli Wallach to play Calvera. Buckles had one line in the original script, as in Seven Samurai, the farmers leave the village to seek help. This was changed by the Mexican centers, who didn't want their country to look weak or oppressed. As Chris and Vin drive the hearse to Boot Hill, they pass a store with the name on its front, P. Garrett, over the door. This is a reference to Pat Garrett, the lawman who killed Billy the Kid. Sturgis had trouble financing the Magnificent Seven. He had to use his Beverly Hills estate as collateral for the loan he needed to go forward. He had to use his Beverly Hills estate and lost his home. Never made a penny from the film. McQueen constantly fidgets in his scenes with Brenner in an attempt to upstage his rival. Yul Brynner got married on the set during filming. All the Mexicans got dressed up in Mexican clothing for the occasion. He loved the black aura of his costume, so much so that he wore it again and again in other films. In 1960, this film was cast in a hurry. Due to a looming strike of the Hollywood chapter of the Screen Actors Guild, it became one of the few films then in production to escape unscathed from the oncoming work stoppage. The film's closing lines echo the words of Seven Samurai. Again we are defeated. The winners are those farmers, not us. Things to look for. Elmer Bernstein's fabulous score, complete with the Magnificent Seven theme, also known as the theme for the Marlboro Man commercials. Note that the costumes worn by the Mexican farmers are spotlessly clean. whereas those worn by the other actors display the normal dirt of day-to-day life. McQueen always trying to upstage his colleagues with little fidgety gestures. Look for Calvera's gold rings and teeth and silver ornamented saddle. The cowboys' low-slung Buscadero-style gun holsters. Watch for the bullfight scene. The use of heavy makeup to make Wallach and Buchholz look Hispanic. The storefront with the name P. Garrett over the door. And listen for the closing lines. Again we are defeated. The winners are those farmers, not us. Now it's time to view the Magnificent Seven. Sit back, settle down. Please remember, it may take a few minutes for the film to roll. Enjoy.